For our audience, I think important, and of course the most important scenario we have to talk about, of course, is what is the role of logistics in a conflict scenario on the Korean Peninsula itself. So what is logistics strategy and conflict preparations? Perhaps you can go through what does that look like? What does logistics looks like when it is to support U.S. and allied forces in the event of a conflict on the peninsula?
Well, as you started off, I'm actually assigned to the Tri-Command, to the United Nations Command, to the U.S. Forces Korea, and to the Combined Forces Command. And so, as part of the Tri-Command, I'm the U4 for the UN Command, the J4 for all the U.S. Joint Force side, and then I become the Deputy C4 for the Combined Forces. And my responsibility and the responsibility for my shop is really to posture to the theater to be able to conduct sustainment operations in armistice, so day-to-day sustainment operations that our components are performing, and then also to be able to transition very quickly from armistice to conflict. And we do that through being able to maintain running estimates and an understanding of where we're at, and also maintain a connection back to the strategic support area in CONUS.
Mm-hmm. For our listeners who are a combination of perhaps those in military service themselves, young career officers, cadets like myself, among many others, as well as potentially civilians who are interested in, of course, this very important topic, and some who are not familiar with necessarily some military terminology. So if there's any specific acronyms, definitely let the audience know perhaps what those are, especially those who might not be familiar. But, as you mentioned, with Tri-Command, with all these, what would be kind of in your mind, the main logistical challenges you would anticipate in the event of a conflict? And how would you overcome those challenges?
Yes. So I really think that the main logistical challenge that we'll face on the Korean Peninsula at time of conflict is overcoming the vast distance between the continental United States and the Korean Peninsula in order to be able to flow forces, material, and commodities through a contested environment here in a timely manner. We are always considering those challenges, and so that really focuses our activities over the course of the year, where we spend time rehearsing the reinforcement of the peninsula through exercises that are held at a collective operational level, as well as tactical training at the unit level. And so thinking through how to move a joint force through a contested environment to get here in time is probably one of our biggest challenges that I think we're going to be facing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think our audience, many of whom, of course, understand the role of the ROC, as well as United States forces, but some may not be aware that, of course, this is a joint command of the United Nations that took place in 1950 and so on. And so it continues to be that force sense. What does that composition of this, joint command look like? How many nations are a part of it? How many languages or, stakeholders do you have to coordinate with on these logistical issues, perhaps?
I think it's really fascinating. And so what really brings us here, like you said, is the United Nations Command. And so the United Nations Command is composed of 18 member nations. And it actually continues to grow. And so Germany was our most recent member nation to join the United Nations Command. And so during the war, the United Nations Command was actually the warfighting command and the operational command. And today, the UN Command is really the command that is overseeing the armistice along the demilitarized zone. The U.S. Forces Korea is the command that command and controls all the U.S. forces on the peninsula. And so if the UN Command is the command that brings our nation here as a mutual treaty ally for the defense of the homelands, not just the Korean Peninsula, but also the United States sees the defense of the United States, interest in defense of the United States by our presence here on the peninsula as well. We have a U.S. Joint Force headquarters to be able to command and control each of our service components, the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and the Space Force. And then we also have the Combined Forces Command, which is at time of war will be led by a U.S. four-star general, and all the U.S. forces, any member UN member nations that contribute any forces to the fight will fall underneath the CFC, and then all the ROC forces also become operational under the operational control of the Combined Forces Command commander. And so when you talk about language in communication in that environment, it is something that we work through all the time. Of course, there's the Hangul English work that we're working through all the time. But then when you have 18 member nations and 18 different languages that come to this, well, not all 18 different languages. There's some English-speaking languages in there as well. But English in the UN Command is the foundational language that we all work off of. And so, but that all speaks to just the challenge of being able to bring multiple nations with a common objective together and create warfighting outcomes. It's not easy, and it takes a lot of work, and it really takes a relationship with everybody to be able to come together.
Certainly. How, I guess, going into that, like, what are some examples of, as you mentioned, with member nations, diverse stakeholders? How do you see cohesion if being